Welcome to Corks Conversation with Liz Milliron.
I am really looking forward to talking with Liz. I met her at a workshop we took together about book publicity, like nearly a year ago, maybe. I'm not quite sure. We'll see if Liz recalls. And so we have lots to talk about with her, including her latest book, which is The Lessons We Learn, a title I absolutely love. I know we're holding it up here if you're watching us on YouTube. So I can't wait.
Yeah. And I am interested in hearing about all that as well. But first, I'm going to tell everyone a little bit more about her.
Yes, please.
So Liz Milliron is the author of the Laurel Highlands Mystery Series, set in the scenic Laurel Highlands, and the Homefront Mysteries set in Buffalo, New York during the early years of World War II. Harm Not the Earth, the fourth in the Laurel Highlands Mysteries, was released in August 2019. The third book of the Homefront Mysteries, The Lessons We Learn, was released in February 2021, right?
2020.
2020. Okay.
Liz, when was it released?
The Lessons We Learn was released yesterday, so 2022.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Actually, it was written
and Harm Not the Earth was released last year in 2021.
For some reason, it has it wrong on your website, I think. But I'll just read that section again. Don't worry.
Let's do that. Yeah.
Okay. Set in Buffalo, New York, during the early years of World War II. Harm Not the Earth, the fourth in the Laurel Highlands Mysteries, was released in 2020. I believe 2021. The third book in the Homefront Mysteries, The Lessons We Learn, was released just this year, February of this year. And Liz lives in Pittsburgh with her husband and a very spoiled retired racer greyhound, which maybe we'll hear sometime during this podcast. And Liz, it's so nice to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Great.
Well, I think we should say cheers to your new release.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
It's like the day before we're recording this, even though it'll be a week or two before you guys actually hear it. So it'll be there in the bookstores.
So
you celebrate a book launch for like a month. So
at least.
Maybe a year. That would be good.
I had to jump ahead because we have to cheer that book release, but Liz kindly suggested a Pinot Grigio, a wine Christie and I both love. Mm-hmm. And like us, she likes a nice label.
Yeah.
Really, you got to pick the wine based on.
It's like the cover of a book, right?
Yeah. But let's clarify. You mean the actual physical label, not just like the winery label.
Oh, no, we like the actual label.
We're not too snobby. We like a cute label on the bottle.
Yeah.
The label on the bottle. I have walked into many wine stores and just said, wow, that's just such a pretty label. I need to buy that. Many different kinds of alcohol, but especially wine. I'd say it's 90% reliable.
Yeah, I would say
that's an official guide.
Well, let's see how this one is.
Okay, so you guys take a drink.
I like it.
Yeah, this is from the central coast of California. It's a crisp, clean Pinot Grigio. Lovely aromas of lemongrass, grapefruit, and honeysuckle lead to decadent flavors of ripe pear, apple, and hints of tangerine.
That's decadent.
I thought that was a lovely combination. It says it's served nicely along seafood or Asian fare with a hint of spice.
Ooh, awesome.
I think it's also served nicely along a historical mystery.
Yeah.
There you go.
I like it. It's got a very light taste. I mean, Pinot Grigio usually has a light taste, but this one's even lighter than.
It's nice.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very, very nice Pinot.
Mm-hmm.
So good choice going with the label.
Good choice.
And I recommend that one to my daughter.
Unlike Liz and I, Christie's actually able to be around Seaglass.
Yes.
we don't have that.
Yes.
There's no Seaglass in Western Pennsylvania at all.
None in South Dakota either.
Well, you never know. It might be if you dig deep enough. I don't know. Probably not. Okay. Well, let's get started on the questions. And we'll, first, we should probably just say a little bit about this book. Betty Ahern is the main character.
Yes.
And she lives in Buffalo, New York in 1943, correct? Or this is where this one takes place?
This book takes place in March of 1943.
Right.
When I started the series, it was late 1942, but we're into 1940.
Well, yeah, we're moving right ahead. I mean, it couldn't have started too much longer because I think she's only like 20 years old, right?
Not even. She's 8. She's still not at
19. Oh, yeah.
Her 19th birthday is coming up.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
So she's over 18. So, you know, that's a big deal back then. It's not 21 as much as it is then, but she's young. She's young. And I have a lot of connection to this. I'll tell you in a minute, but I'm wondering what made you place this story in that time frame and in Buffalo.
It's a great question. The whole genesis for Betty and these stories came from a short story challenge, actually. I belong to a national organization known as Sisters in Crime. And my local chapter several years ago issued a short story challenge that we would all try to write and submit as many short stories as possible to a lot of the anthologies that you see, especially anthologies associated with conferences like Malice Domestic and VoucherCon. And the call for Malice for that year was for historical stories. And I thought, well, that one's not for me. I don't write historical. I write contemporary. I'll just let that go. But then I started thinking about my grandmother, who did work for Bell Airplane during World War II. She made P-39s.
Wow.
And I started thinking about her, and she was a little bit older than Betty. But I started thinking about her and her job, and it was like, well, what happens if this young woman who is just doing what she thinks is her patriotic duty to help the war effort shows up one day and there's a dead body on the manufacturing? Well, that was the start of that was the very first short story, which was called Homefront Homicide, and was accepted and was published in the Malice Domestic anthology that year. And then I had written 2 set stories in the Laurel Highlands series, and I was still querying. I was still trying to find a home for them. And I didn't want to continue to write books in that series and spend time if I never got it sold. It would just be a waste. So I said, well, I need to write something different. I wanted to do something different, and I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. I didn't think I wanted to write a historical series. But Betty kind of poked her head up and said, I got a story for you. And she wouldn't leave me alone. So I started that series. Then sold the Laurel Highlands, had to put Betty aside for a little bit. But then my publisher actually started a historical imprint. And they were looking for historical mysteries. And I said, well, I've got one of those if you're interested. I have one of those. And they signed a 3-book deal, and this is the 3rd book in that contract.
Wow. Oh, yeah, that's great.
That's where this comes from.
Okay. Well, I got to tell you my connections. My mother was born in Buffalo in 1943.
Oh, really?
Yes. So my grandmother was probably 20. I don't know how old she was when my mom was born. And my grandfather actually went off to the war. He actually was killed in World War II. My grandmother remarried, but I mean, I don't know, for a while, her and her sisters might have been kind of like little detectives in the neighborhood because they're a fun crowd. There was like, they're Polish. So, it was like the whole big family. She was one of like, I don't know, I want to say 6 or 8 sisters, and then there was one brother or something. And one of my mom's aunts is still alive, and so I'm dying to send her this book because this is probably right when, she was in high school age or something. And
That's crazy.
oh, I know.
And well, to that is a little bit crazy because Betty is Irish, and Buffalo, much like Pittsburgh and a lot of the cities in the Northeast, they were very ethnic. They had lots of little ethnic neighborhoods. So Betty lives in a neighborhood called the First Ward, which is where all the Irish lived in Buffalo. Not this book, but the last book, The Stories We Tell, centered around a Polish family that lived in what would have been the Polonia or the Polish neighborhood in Buffalo at the time.
That's interesting.
So,
I need to look at where that is because I don't know. I know I've spent a lot of time up there and taken my kids up because I live in South Florida and they grew up down here. So and I grew up down here, so I was born and raised. And so the only time I saw snow, in my youngest was when we would go up there for Christmas. And that time we would drive in the station wagon. You can imagine it wasn't pleasant. So in turn, I took my kids up for some, holidays, but we flew and most of the time, I think. And so that's where they got to see snow. But because I was like, where can you go that you're almost guaranteed? I didn't know Cathi at the time, or I would have brought them there for sure.
Oh no, you were almost guaranteed anytime between October and April. You are.
Yeah, I was like, even it's not right where they are because they lived in Kenmore, so it's just right up there, and even though it wasn't always right where they were, because the lake effect. I mean, you could go like just out of town and there'd be like drifts or something. So but we got a few times where we were the local park and over there making snowmen, and I remember doing that when I was little. So cool place. I like Buffalo.
I was thinking that we should, for our listeners who don't know much about the series, and we should explain that Betty, young, as Liz said, she has a dream. She wants to be a private detective,
which is so amazing in that time frame too.
I know. Yeah. I love the concept of that. Like you said, you thought of this short story, where a young woman, who's serving her country, doing her patriotic duty, but she finds this dead body, and very unfortunately, but to have a young woman in the 1940s have a dream of a career herself, I just think is such a really cool take.
Yeah, and it intrigued me because the other thing about Betty is she's a movie buff. She loves movies, and she loves detective flicks. Sam Spade, Philip Marlowe, Nick and
I didn't realize they had that back then either. When I was reading, I was like going, that's like, me watching Law and Order or something,
Well, kind of.
Actually, I referenced Casablanca, this new movie in this latest book. So, and I spend a lot of time on movie databases going, okay, when did this movie come out? Can I use this one?
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, and so I'm imagining you had to do a lot of research. I mean, do you have family in that area yourself, or?
I do actually. I grew up there. I grew up in a suburb of Buffalo in the South Towns called Hamburg. If you go up in, because
my ex-husband's family was from Buffalo. We didn't meet there, but it's kind of weird. We were like, okay, they're all up there.
No, I grew up in Hamburg, and my husband actually grew up in another suburb called Cheektowaga. Okay. So we have roots in the area. The
research wasn't as involved as it would have been if you didn't know the area either because
not as yes and no. I mean, Buffalo hasn't changed a whole lot. The streets are pretty much there, and a lot of the buildings are still there. And I ask my dad all the time because he grew up in the area. He was born in 1947, which is a little bit after the series, but he's a history buff and he's retired, so he loves doing research.
Oh, perfect.
And I'll ask him, I'll be like, hey, this building, I see this building on the map now. Was it there? And he'll be able to tell me, oh yeah, that was still there, or no, that wasn't there, or what have you. So I am familiar with a lot of the area and a lot of the neighborhoods and their ethnicities. There's still a lot of research because things change. Are the build, new buildings come along. Like the book I'm working on just right now, I was trying to reference police headquarters, and I had to find out, okay, well, is the current police headquarters where it was in 1943? And it turns out, no, not so much. So I've got a good basis from having lived there. But there's still a lot of research to what did it look like in 1943. And in a lot of cases, it's very much the same. But there's always a factual change. This book, I talk about Buffalo's Central Terminal, which was their Grand Central. If you think of Grand Central in New York, Central Terminal in Buffalo was the train station. And of course, it hasn't actually been a train station in many, many, many years. The building still exists. They don't know what to do with it. It's beautiful Art Deco architecture. But there's research in, okay, well, what was it like to take a train from Buffalo in 1943?
Wow.
What kind of trains were there? Where could you take a train to? It turns out you could take a train to a lot of places.
I bet.
Very strange.
That kind of research sounds really fun to me. Like that just sounds like
that's exactly what I was thinking.
I would just.
I imagine Cathi having a map of 1940s Buffalo on one whole wall, and then she would just go over and be like, "Okay, they're walking." Because she's so I was wondering, are you like a planner like that in general, or
no?
You don't have a big map on the wall?
I don't have a big map on the wall. I do have a collection of old maps stored as JPEG files on my computer that I can look at any time.
That's a little better for technology.
It is a little bit. I think, Cathi, I heard you say a rabbit hole. It is a little bit of a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Again, not for this book, but the previous one, I spent an entire day researching washing machines, clothes washing machines. Like, what did how did you wash your clothes in 1940?
Well, it
was like 1942.
I know, you got to get it right.
Did it, and it turns out, yes, you did have a washing machine, and Maytag was just starting to make washing machines. They stopped once the war came out because, of course, everybody was doing war production. But I spent an entire afternoon researching, well, what did a washing machine look like in 1942 and how did it work? And I did all of this for about 3 lines.
Yeah, I was just going to say, at what point do you have to go, wait?
I know.
Yeah, eventually you just have to say, stop.
Yeah.
Okay. Fascinating.
Maybe I'll just be vague about it.
Yeah. For 3 lines, how much are you going to?
I'm curious.
And then what if they cut it? Like the editor comes in and says, "Oh, we don't need this."
Well, yeah, and sometimes that has happened. It's like I've got all this detail, and my editor's like, "No, we really don't need 4 paragraphs of description
no
about
one
a washing
cares." But I have 2 questions. One is about that because you always hear about when people spot things like an historical, like a Starbucks cup, and I don't remember what movie it was, and people really love to find those things that stick out. And so I'm wondering if you had any of that. And then also, I am curious about the language that they use, because Betty isn't going to speak as a 19-year-old like my 19-year-old speaks. And I noticed that right away. I was like, oh, I can tell I am reading about what a 19-year-old in 1943 would say versus a 19-year-old now. And I was wondering how you did that research.
Well, the first question is easy, and the answer is not yet.
It just came out though. Well, it was but you are on the 3rd one. So.
I did actually. I have a critique group who helps me. They read the pages, so they're reading the book as I'm writing it, and they're spotting things. I did get busted in this one for having a car with a seatbelt.
Oh.
And they were like, no, cars didn't have seat. I mean, there were cars out there that did have seatbelts, but they were not common. And he's like, the critique group was hard. No, this is not. She's not putting on a seatbelt.
Yeah.
And I had another thing that I found. It was actually late. It was when I was doing one of my final edits, my final revisions. I had put 2 buildings in that didn't exist until the mid-50s.
Ooh.
So I had to go back. All of a sudden I was like, wow, they weren't doing waste water treatment back in the 40s. That wasn't a thing. I can't put the water treatment plant in Woodlawn in there. So I had to go back and be like, okay, well, how do I do that? But not yet. The answer to the
Well,
first question
it sounds
is
like your
not yet, 'cause
critique
I've been
group
careful.
is going to take care of that for you.
I know. I mean,
they-
you have to.
and a lot of a couple of my critique partners are older.
I was going to
so
say, like, are they 90 or something? So
they're not 90, but there's one gentleman who's I think in his 70s, and another couple who are in their late 50s, early 60s. So
Okay.
they're not quite as old.
But they're old
but
enough
they're
to
still-
remember like
they're
things
old
like
enough to be
seatbelts
like,
and things
no,
like that.
no,
Yeah.
Liz, that
You-
doesn't.
yeah, no.
That's not a thing. That's not a thing.
Yeah. I don't think we even put seatbelts on, and that was, the 70s.
Oh heavens! The cars had seatbelts, but I didn't.
But they had 'em.
routinely wear a seatbelt.
But I don't think they
until
had
I
the
was-
shoulder ones. Yeah.
When I was, I mean, I'm younger. I'm not
Mhm.
even quite 50 yet, so I do remember cars in the 80s having shoulder seatbelts. But growing up in New York, you didn't have to wear them. There was no.
Yeah. I
lick it
can't
or
really
take it.
remember because I'm so used to them now. It's like hard to remember.
No,
My
I do
first
remember-
car in the 80s, I know it. I probably, I don't know if I think I wore
No,
seatbelts.
I do remember.
I always
being
wore
in-
seatbelts.
I remember being in the car with my grandmother. We had gone to Pennsylvania to visit her sister, and we were coming back, and Grandma had a little bit of a lead foot, and we did get pulled over for speeding. And I remember the trooper who pulled us over told me to put my seatbelt on. And then I
Oh.
put it on, and I didn't like the shoulder harness. It like cut my neck. So I put the lap belt on, but I moved the harness behind me, and he's like, no, miss, you need to put the whole
Oh.
seatbelt on. I remember that.
Yeah.
I
And that
bet
would
you
have been
do.
the
funny.
late 80s.
I bet that was a
Okay.
vivid memory.
Mhm.
So, and to answer your question about the language, that one's really interesting for me as a writer, because there's always a question of making, especially dialogue, authentic to the period, but
Mhm.
you don't want to go overboard because you don't want people to not understand what your characters are saying.
Right.
So you got to
Wow.
be a little bit careful with the slang. I watched a lot of movies from the 40s.
Ah.
The movies aren't always the greatest historical research because they tend to like screw it up.
Yeah.
But I watched a few like Casablanca and Bogart, and I watched.
That sounds
those
horrible.
movies.
I'm sorry to do that.
Oh no, it's the things we will have to do. They have to do for research. It's
Awful.
horrible.
You
I
had
had
to
to sit
watch
and watch movies,
Yeah.
classic movies. I read a couple of books series set in the 40s to get kind of that sound in my head. And then I have a couple of websites that I use. One is specifically about slang, the common slang terms that they used in the 40s. And I tried to pick a small handful and stick with it and not,
Mhm.
overload the reader
Mhm.
with slang. So
Mhm.
as I, like calling money cabbage, they'll get that. If I do it a couple of times in
Yeah.
the first book, by the third book that becomes like, oh, I
Oh,
know
that's
such a
so
funny
funny
one.
because my grandfather used to send us he used to send us some bunny food or something, he would call it, like
Mhm.
cabbage. I think it must have been cabbage. You'd send us like,
Yeah, because money was either lettuce or cabbage because it was
yeah,
green.
yeah.
That's
You know.
hilarious.
But I have one website that I go to for slang, and then I have another website that just allows me to check the age of a word.
Mhm.
Because just because it sounds old doesn't mean it is old.
Mm-mm.
And I've been tripped up with like words that I thought were pretty common in the 40s, and it's like, no, that didn't come along until the 60s.
Ugh.
And on
Interesting.
the other hand, there's terms that I thought were much newer that I found no, they do use them in the 40s. The phrase sugar daddy. I was sure that was a 60s
Yeah.
thing. And no, they were using it in the early 40s, and it meant exactly what it
Okay.
meant in the 60s.
I thought it was a regular
knew?
South
Okay.
Florida thing right now.
Yeah.
Who knew? So that's
All
what
right.
keeps me
On
on the
that,
language.
yeah, I see Christie's reaching. Liz, it's time for the question in the bottle. We always ask a question to our
Oh no.
guest authors, a random question.
And they're not that hard. Well,
No.
usually. This will be interesting. What is something you are obsessed with?
Ooh.
Oh my gosh, what a question. wow, obsessed with?
Like a good
Yeah, it
obsession
could
or a
be
bad
it could be
obsession?
funny or a good one or a bad one. I mean, what is it that you like? I'm trying to think right now myself. I forgot to think about what
What am I
my
obsessed with? I don't have a lot of obsessions.
That's actually
I've
probably
grown out of
good.
Here's one. It's kind of stupid. This one's because I have all these books behind me, and you can see that they're not really organized in any particular way. Like
Yeah.
over here, I have my Harry Potter collection, and I've got all 7 of those together. But we're very happy. I always think it's funny when people ask authors, "Well, how do you arrange your books? By color, by author, by series?" I'm like, "How they ever fit my shelf? I just throw them
yeah.
in
As long as they're not on the
there."
floor.
But I have one bookshelf outside, one shelf where everything on that shelf must be in descending size.
Oh,
It's only
interesting.
one shelf. It's
Why
the
that
That
shelf?
that's
I,
that's
I I'm
interesting.
not sure why that particular, and it's a short bookshelf. It's only like maybe 2.5 feet tall, and it's only the books on the very top. And maybe because it's visible all the time,
Maybe.
I was looking at them and they were all haphazard, and I said, because it's where I keep my these are things that I'm going to read next. These are things that I
Oh,
recommend.
Mhm.
interesting. So
And
it's not in order of what you want to read next. It's more of size
it's got
and
the
yeah.
tallest to shortest.
Oh,
And I
that's
was
so
looking at it one
interesting.
day and I couldn't figure out why it was bothering me. And and I'm like, you know what? These just need to be organized by size. So they start at tall and they go down to short. And when I buy a
Oh,
new
wow.
book and I want to put it on the shelf, I have to line it up with what's already there. So it goes in the right
Okay,
place.
I'm going to say
And
that's an A plus
that is the
answer.
only book.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
Yeah. Yes. That's a good one. That's a
That
good
is really good.
obsession.
That is
Yeah.
And that's
I
and
very
now
healthy.
if you have anybody who's listening to this that knows you, if they want to mess with you, just as you're
I'll
walking
come in and
by,
reorganize that shelf.
reorganize.
Your husband is going to be like,
Just take everything and put it in
Yeah.
in a different
Oh
order so it's
man,
all
I
jumbled up
didn't
again.
like what she said earlier, so I'm going to put this in
redo her
there.
books.
That's great. I like it.
Oh, that's a great question.
Yep.
And good answer.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm really curious to ask about your path to writing at this
Mhm.
point in your life. I'm going to read a little bit from your author page, a little condensed, and ask you about it on the other side. So on Liz's about page on her website, she kind of gives you her path, and I'm shortening it here. She says, shortly after I got married, I wrote my first mystery. Then life happened. I had one kid, then another. We got a dog. I had a job. One day the job went away. The kids were older. Then my husband said, why don't you finish that novel? So I did. I joined Sisters in Crime. I learned what writing a mystery is really about, what it really meant. I wrote some short stories. I wrote another book. I queried agents. I heard no. I found my critique group. I wrote again, and I got better. I just thought that was, in a
That's great.
nutshell, brilliant. And it
Well, thank
also
you.
sounds so familiar to both Christy and I, but also to so many listeners. It's such a common thing to hear, for us to hear from people who have had their career, maybe they've had their family, and they finally are returning to this thing that they've been wanting to
Mhm.
do. But not everybody follows through with it. Not everybody does the work or can fight through those no's and show up every day at their desk or every other day or whatever works. So I was wondering if you could give listeners some advice or thoughts about writing later in life.
Oh, that's a really great question. It's so hard to get it. This is going to sound so simple, and yet it's not at the same time. Is you have to do the work. Like for years, when I sat down to write my second book, and then rewrite the second book, and then rewrite it again, I took because I did wind up getting another 9 to 5 job. And I took my personal laptop to work with me every day. And I sat in the little cafe, the cafeteria area, and I wrote for an hour on my lunch hour. Um, and So when the teams were like, hey, we're going out to lunch, or we're doing this, or we're doing that, I'm like, no, I've got to write. And you gotta develop that kind of discipline muscle, and you have to decide, is it important enough? Because a lot of people are like, oh, I'd love to write a book, but I don't have time. And the answer is, well, you do have time, but is it important enough that you're going to carve out that time? Are you going to give up an hour of television? Are you going to get up? Some people get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to write before their kids get up, or before they have to go to work, or are you going to stay up late? Or are you going to give up your lunch hour? You got to decide how important it is to you, and then you just got to do it. You got to sit down and you got to do the work, and you got to do it. And then my second piece of advice is, while you're doing it and you're thinking, oh, this is awful, because it is, you're going to sit there and be like, I can't believe I decided I was going to do this. This is so hard. And this stinks. And what was I thinking of? My very favorite, or one of my very favorite pieces of advice, comes from Hallie Efron, who's an author, who said, just hold your nose and write. Just hold your nose and write. And you're going to finish that awful, awful first draft. And it is going to be awful. It is not going to be that beautiful. I that was my first book. I finished it and I'm like, oh, it's probably just needs a little bit of polishing.
Yeah, I know. That's the shocker that happens at the end. But you can't think of that while you're doing it.
No, you're right. You can't. That first book wound up in a digital drawer, and it belongs in a digital drawer. It was a good exercise in teaching me what I needed to know. But the first draft is going to be terrible, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Because then you're going to sit down and you're going to take classes, or you're going to join a group like Sisters in Crime, or or Romance Writers of America, or whatever your genre is. And you're going to learn, and you're going to revise it, and you're going to make it better. But the very first thing is to decide, how important is this to you? Are you going to find the time in your day that you could be writing? Or are you going to suck out in front of Netflix and binge watch, Desperate Housewives? And that's okay. That is okay.
Yeah.
If that's what you want to do.
Right.
Go for it.
Right. Because I think I do hear a lot, and probably Cathi, and when we say, okay, we wrote a book, we're trying to get published, or we're editing a book or something, people are like, I've always wanted to do that, and the response is, we'll do it. But it's not as easy as it sounds.
No, it's not. It's someplace, I don't know if this is apocryphal, but I seem to remember reading someplace, it's like 90% of the population wishes they could write a book, but only 10% of the population sits down and does it. And of that 10%, only like 1% get published.
Yeah. I was going to say that too. I think it's one of those bucket list things that many people have on their lists. But as you say, there's only so many hours in the day for everyone, and you have to decide how you're going to spend them.
24 hours.
Yeah. It's always, I'm fascinated by that idea, because, you look at some people who can, like you, Liz, you still have another full-time job. You've got, 2 series, but you've made it happen. You've made it work. And so are you still doing the noon hour? Is that still how you do your schedule?
More or less. It's that I do want, because I'm not very productive. The other thing is, every writer has to find. I had a dear editor friend of mine. She passed away, but she said her thing was, find your creative time. What is your creative time? Some people, it's first thing, really early in the morning. Mine is midday, because by the end of the day, I've put in 8 hours at my day job and I'm done. I just want to sit back and have a glass of wine and read a book and relax. So yeah, it is still mostly 12 to 1. Sometimes it'll be later in the day. Sometimes I'll get opportunities on the weekends for bonus time. But it is still mostly that midday hour.
I think that is incredibly inspirational for people to hear, that you can get novels written by working 1 hour a day, but it's the consistency, I'm going to guess, is what you, the discipline is what you had said.
Yeah.
250 words is a page. And at 250 words a day, you have a novel in 8 months. Yeah. Something like that, I think. I mean, it takes a while, but you'll do it. You'll do it in a year. The other thing, and it just occurred to me, I hadn't said this, is you have to decide what your goal is with the book. Like, do you want to be published? Do you want an author? Do you want to walk into Barnes and Noble and see your book on a, on the table,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Mhm.
really hard,
Mm-hmm.
because publishers pay for that,
Right.
Yeah.
Me, I decided to go with a small press, which
Mhm.
is not quite, I'm never going to walk into Barnes and Noble and see my book on a table, but you know what? It's out
Never
there.
say never.
Well, probably not unless my publisher decides to
But
shell
it's
out
not
money.
your goal. So
But it's not
you're
my goal.
happy with that. Yeah.
But you know what? Your goal might not even be publication, like traditional publishing. You might
Mhm.
want to self-publish it. You might just want to have said, I wrote it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'll bind the copies and give it to your
Mhm.
friends and family, but you wrote a book.
Right.
Yeah.
And if that's what you want to do with it, great,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
But you need to
It's just
decide
like
what does
any kind of
success
thing
look
on
like
your
for you.
bucket list or something. It could be,
Yeah.
That's
doesn't
great.
have to be a
maybe you just
career.
wanna
You can
say you
still
wrote a
do
book.
it. Great.
I love
That's
that.
great.
I love that. I think a lot of people are going to be very inspired by that, Liz,
Yes.
because that's very tangible to give that
Yes.
hour a day advice.
Yes. Okay.
Christy has a final question for you.
Yes. So, our final question to appease all
Final
our
Jeopardy.
mysterious foodies out there. Which of your characters would you like to share a meal with, and what would it be?
Oh, wow.
It
That's
can
an
be any
excellent.
character from past, future.
Can I pick a different series than this one?
Mhm.
The thing
Yes,
with Betty is,
absolutely.
the thing with Betty eating and food in the 40s is that you had so much in terms of rationing
Yes.
Oh,
that,
yeah.
you don't
I
get
thought it
any
was funny.
fancy
She
meals.
talked about the bologna sandwich, and I was like, oh, I remember my
Oh,
mom
yeah,
making me
that was
those when I
that.
was little.
Mhm.
So that was from her
Yeah,
childhood.
yeah, fried bologna sandwich would have been it.
Uh-huh.
You don't eat.
If you get onion on it,
One,
you're a bonus.
I've never gotten into fried bologna. My husband likes them, me not so much. I would have to pick actually one of the protagonists from my Laurel Highlands series, Jim Duncan, who is the state trooper.
Yeah.
And I would probably have him grill something, either a really nice steak
Mm.
or fresh cut. He's a fisherman, so he likes to fish and he knows how to cook
Oh,
fish.
that
So
sounds really
he has
nice.
made some really good meals. He did a cedar
Yum.
planked salmon
Oh my
with
gosh.
roasted potatoes
Yes,
and grilled
please.
vegetables.
My stomach's
Right up
starting to
my
growl
alley.
right now. That sounds delish. And I bet he's cute
Right up
too.
my alley.
I bet he's cute too. Sounds like a lovely dinner companion.
Yes,
Anyone who wants to
yes.
cook for us, right?
Yep.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, Liz, it's been so fun talking with you today. I am
Thank
curious.
you. I've enjoyed it.
Thanks. Listeners who want to find out more about you, where should they go to find that?
Probably the best place to go to is my website, which is www.lizmilliron.com, LizMilliron. That has links to all my social media. I am on Facebook and Instagram mostly, where you can catch up with me there. Be prepared to see lots of pictures of my dog. There will be lots of pictures of the dog.
Oh, we love
Um,
dog pictures.
Yeah,
I mean-
the dog insists on being, well, he doesn't insist, but I get a lot of conversations out of the dog pictures. But that has links to my social media. You can find me, like I said, Facebook and Instagram. It'll also give you the opportunity to sign up for my monthly newsletter.
Mm.
I do send a monthly newsletter. I do not spam you. I will not sell your email address, but
Great.
every month you'll get a little, update on what's happening with the writing in the books. And when you sign up, you get 2 free short stories, one from each series.
Oh, nice. Nice.
So-
All
That is a
right.
major
And
bonus.
I'm also on
You're that,
Goodreads and
guys?
Yeah, I'm on Goodreads. You'll find links to Goodreads and BookBub. I'm out there, but I just they list my books. I don't.
Yeah.
Right.
I haven't figured out.
Well, there's only
Goodreads.
so much you can do unless you
Right?
hire
There is
somebody,
only so
right?
much I
Well, this has been
Yeah.
so much fun. We're so thankful that you were able to meet with us today. And
Congratulations on the
congratulations
publication,
on the book birthday.
the lessons
Well,
we
thank you so
learned.
much. This has
And
been
I
great
think
being here.
we
Thank
have
you.
to do another cheers.
Yes, we do.
Before we
Cheers,
go.
Liz.
Cheers.
Cheers.